Alejandro Reyes, a wealthy businessman, had never been one to come home early. His routine usually involved arriving well after 9 p.m., after the business day had ended and everyone in his home was asleep. That evening, however, his meeting with investors in Mexico City wrapped up earlier than anticipated, and on a rare impulse he decided to head home without notifying anyone. As he entered the grand mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Los Lomas, Alejandro paused at the entrance, unable to believe what he was seeing. In the middle of the living room, there was Clara, the 28-year-old housekeeper, kneeling on the wet floor, scrubbing away with a cloth. But it wasn't her presence that stopped Alejandro in his tracks. It was the sight beside her. His son Mateo, barely 4 years old, was standing there with his small purple crutches, holding a kitchen towel and attempting to help Clara clean the floor. "Tia Clara, I can clean this part over here," Mateo said, stretching his tiny arm out in an attempt to wipe the floor. "Don't worry, Mateo, you've helped me enough today. How about you sit on the couch while I finish up?" Clara replied with a soft, gentle tone that Alejandro had never heard before. "But I want to help. You always say we're a team," Mateo insisted, trying to balance himself on his crutches. Alejandro stood frozen in the doorway, watching the scene unfold, his mind struggling to process it. There was something in the interaction between the two of them that moved him in a way he couldn't explain. Mateo was smiling, something Alejandro rarely saw in his home. "All right, my little helper, but just a little bit more." "Okay," Clara said, agreeing to let Mateo help. It was then that Mateo spotted his father standing at the door. His face lit up, but there was a mixture of surprise and fear in his blue eyes. "Dad, you're home early," Mateo exclaimed, trying to turn around quickly but nearly losing his balance. Clara jumped up, dropping the cloth to the floor. She wiped her hands on her apron and quickly lowered her gaze. "Good evening, Mr. Alejandro. I didn't know you were finishing the cleaning already," she stammered, clearly nervous. Alejandro was still processing the scene. His gaze shifted from his son, who was still holding the towel, to Clara, who seemed to want nothing more than to disappear. "Mateo, what are you doing?" Alejandro asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm helping Tia Clara." "Dad, look," Mateo said, wobbling a few steps toward his father, proud of his effort. "Today I stood up all by myself for almost 5 minutes. Alejandro's eyes widened as he looked at Clara, searching for an explanation. 5 minutes, Alejandro repeated, stunned. "How is that possible?" "Tia Clara teaches me exercises every day," Mateo explained eagerly. "She says if I practice a lot, one day I'll be able to run like the other kids." The silence in the room became heavy. Alejandro felt a swirl of emotions: anger, gratitude, confusion. He turned his gaze back to Clara. "Exercises?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Clara finally raised her head, her brown eyes full of fear. "Mr. Alejandro, I was just playing with Mateo. I didn't mean to do anything wrong. If you'd like, I can Tia Clara," Mateo interjected, quickly stepping between the two adults. "Dad, Tia Letta's Clara is the best. She never gives up on me, even when I cry because it hurts. She says I'm strong like a warrior." Alejandro felt a knot tighten in his chest. When was the last time he'd seen his son so excited? When was the last time he'd talked to him for more than 5 minutes? "Mateo, go to your room. I need to speak with Clara," Alejandro said, trying to sound firm yet gentle. "But Dad," now Mateo asked, looking at Clara, who gave him an encouraging smile, signaling that everything was fine. Mateo limped up the stairs with his crutches, but not before calling out, "Tia Clara is the best person in the world." Once they were alone, Alejandro moved closer, noticing for the first time how Clara's blue jeans were stained with dampness from scrubbing the floor, and her hands were red from the effort. "How long has this been going on?" Alejandro asked. "Sir, the exercises." Clara hesitated before answering. "Since I started working here about 6 months ago, but I swear I never let it affect my work. I do the exercises with him during my lunch break or after I finish everything. You don't pay me extra for this." Alejandro looked at her, trying to comprehend the situation. "You don't receive extra payment for this?" "No, sir, and I'm not asking for anything," Clara replied, her voice steady now, despite her nervousness. "I just enjoy playing with Mateo. He's a special child." "A special child?" Alejandro asked, genuinely curious. "In what way?" Clara seemed taken aback by the question. "What do you mean, sir? You said he's special. How so?" Clara smiled for the first time since Alejandro arrived. "He's determined, sir. Even when the exercises are hard, and he wants to cry, he doesn't give up, and he has such a big heart. He always worries if I'm tired or sad. He's a very caring child." Alejandro's chest tightened again. When was the last time he had noticed those qualities in his own son? "Sir, with all due respect, Mateo is very lonely," Clara continued. "Mrs. Gabriela is always busy with her friends, and you work a lot." Alejandro's thoughts were interrupted as he processed her words. "So you thought maybe I could help," he said quietly, finishing her sentence. "Yes, sir, but if you don't want me to, I can stop. I wanted him to smile more, sir. A child should smile every day." Clara's words hit Alejandro like a punch to the gut. When had he stopped noticing his own son's smiles? When had he stopped truly seeing him? Alejandro stood, still, absorbing Clara's words. He felt a strange mix of guilt and gratitude. Guilt for not noticing his own son's struggle and for letting his work consume so much of his life. And yet, there was something about Clara's dedication, her care, and the way she believed in Mateo that struck him profoundly. "Where's Gabriela?" Alejandro asked, looking around the room. "She went out for dinner with her friends," Clara replied. "She said she'd be back late. I stayed with Mateo. He had dinner, took a bath, and we did the exercises. I think was just finishing up the cleaning when he wanted to help." Alejandro stared at Clara, his mind racing. She had been more present in his son's life than he had. He'd been busy building an empire that had cost him his connection with his own child. Clara shifted uncomfortably. "If you don't want me to keep doing this, I'll stop. But Mateo, he's an amazing little boy, and I believe he can do anything." Alejandro's heart tightened. "Clara," he said softly, his voice unsteady, "you've done more for him than I ever have." He paused for a moment before continuing. "I've been so caught up in work that I didn't even notice how much my son needed me. You've been there when I wasn't, when I should have been." Clara smiled faintly, her eyes still filled with the tenderness she had for Mateo. "Just doing what I can. He deserves to have someone believe in him." Alejandro's chest tightened. He'd been so focused on his career and financial success that he had failed to see the most important thing of all, the emotional needs of his family. "You're right, Clara, and I'll make sure you know how much this means to me." Clara looked at him, surprised by his sudden shift. "Sir, I just do it because I care about Mateo. He's a special child. He deserves all the care and support in the world. I want to do better for him," Alejandro said, his voice barely a whisper. "And for you." The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, with Alejandro struggling to find the right ones. "Clara," he began, his eyes locking with hers, "I need to ask you something." "Something personal?" Clara blinked, a little surprised, but nodded. "Of course, sir. What is it?" "Why do you work as a housekeeper?" Alejandro asked, his tone shifting from emotional to thoughtful. "You clearly have the knowledge and skill to do much more. You've been so patient with Mateo, teaching him, guiding him. Why not pursue something in healthcare? You'd be incredible at it." Clara's eyes darkened slightly as she lowered her gaze. "I can't afford to go back to school, sir. I didn't finish my studies, and without a degree no one will give me a chance." She paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "And I need to support my family, my mother, and my little brother, Carlos. He's 16, working part-time, and my mom cleans offices at night. We do what we can." Alejandro's heart clenched at the reality of her life. He never truly knew the struggles that Clara faced. He never knew what it was like for her to wake up at 6 a.m., take 2 buses to get to work all day, and then head home to cook and care for her family. She worked tirelessly for others, and yet she had never asked for more than what was offered. "Clara, I never knew," Alejandro started, his voice faltering. "I never realized how much you've been carrying." Clara met his gaze again, her eyes full of a quiet strength. "It's not easy, sir, but I do it because it's what's best for my family. I do it for them." Alejandro looked at her, feeling a deep admiration for the woman who had selflessly given so much of herself, not only to her family but to Mateo. In that moment, he understood just how much she had shaped his son's life. "You've been an incredible help to us," Clara, Alejandro said, his voice full of conviction. "And I want to help you too. I want to do more than just pay you for your work. I want to offer you the chance to go back to school. I'll cover everything, the tuition, the books, transportation. If you're willing to pursue a course in physiotherapy, I'll make sure you have the opportunity." Clara stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You would do that for me? But why?" "Because you've done so much for Mateo," Alejandro said, his tone firm. "You've believed in him when I didn't. You've given him something I couldn't. You deserve the chance to fulfill your dreams, Clara. You're not just a housekeeper, you're part of this family." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she struggled to find words. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Clara. Just say yes." A long silence passed before Clara finally spoke, her voice filled with gratitude. "Yes, I'll do it. I'll go back to school." "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Alejandro smiled, feeling a weight lift from his chest. "Good, you'll see. Clara, Mateo is going to walk, run, and do everything he dreams of, and I'll be there to help him. But I'm also going to help you realize your own dreams." The next morning, Mateo was already up and about, eager to show his father how much he had progressed. He had become so motivated by Clara's belief in him, and Alejandro couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride as he watched his son attempt to stand without his crutches. Clara led him through his exercises, patiently guiding him as he took small steps, each one filled with determination. Alejandro watched as his son, once full of fear and doubt, was now walking with confidence, his smile as bright as the sun. "Dad, watch, I'm going to do it," Mateo shouted, his face beaming with pride as he stood on his own for a few seconds. "Look, I'm walking." Alejandro's heart swelled with joy. "That's amazing, son. You're incredible. I'm so proud of you." Clara smiled, watching the father and son bond over their shared triumph. "You've both come so far," she said softly. Alejandro nodded, his eyes filled with tears. We've both come far because of you, Clara. You've made a difference in our lives. Now, it's my turn to make a difference in yours. Days turned into weeks, and Mateo continued to grow stronger with Clara's help. And while Alejandro's work didn't slow down, his priorities had shifted. He began to spend more time with Mateo, and their connection grew. No longer was he the distant father, he was present, both physically and emotionally. And then, one afternoon, a breakthrough came. Mateo stood up, his crutches nowhere in sight. He was really walking toward his father, his face filled with excitement. "Dad, I did it. I'm walking all by myself," Mateo exclaimed, his voice full of joy and triumph. Alejandro rushed forward to embrace him, his heart overwhelmed with pride. "You did it, Mateo. You really did it." As Mateo wrapped his arms around his father, Alejandro realized something profound. It wasn't just the physical progress that mattered, it was the emotional healing, the trust, and the love that had been nurtured in their home. And it was all thanks to Clara, the woman who had not only helped his son walk but had helped him reconnect with the most important part of his life, his family. As the days passed, Alejandro's perspective on life continued to evolve. No longer was he chasing success at the expense of his family. He had learned the value of being present, of being there for the people who mattered most. And through it all, Clara had been there, guiding them both, showing them the power of love, determination, and belief. And in that moment, Alejandro knew that nothing could ever be more important than the love and support of those who cared for him, especially the woman who had given his son the chance to believe in himself again. If you like the story, don't forget to like and subscribe the channel for more inspirational stories.